to these next 30 minutes with you all. I had a chance to talk with our guest speaker offline and was happy to hear that she has attended several Chat and Learns before. And now we're going to dive into 30 minutes with your awesome questions that you have submitted offline. So let's just jump right into this. I see that we've got folks joining from different places in the world. Go ahead and let us know where you're calling from. I'm in Argentina. I'm Buenos Aires. Our guest speaker, Lena, is calling from Seattle in the States. I see that Natasha's calling from the UK. So if you're just joining us, go ahead and write in the chat box where you're calling from. And then if you want to turn your cameras on, feel free to do so. We would love to see you and meet you virtually. Don't worry if you haven't showered. If you need to put a virtual background on, all good. There's no judgment here, but we want to hear from you. We want to see you, and we really want to maximize these next 30 minutes together. So with that said, I'm going to just jump into our first round of questions. Let's hear from you, Lena. Let's learn a little bit about you. I'd love to hear, how did you come to know about PowerToFly, and then talk to us about what you're excited to share with us today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Mariella. So as Mariella mentioned, I'm from Seattle. I am a senior software engineer at Getty Images. Beyond my software engineering job, I also do consulting, product, and program management work. I have been involved with PowerToFly probably over a year. I had attended one of their events last year, a live event. But I have found this community very awesome. I love all these office chats. I have learned so much. So this is a great opportunity for all of us to meet. So thank you so much, Mariella. And I'm really excited to talk about software engineering today.
Awesome. Okay, so I see some folks are turning their cameras on. Thank you so much. Where are you calling from today? You can write it in the chat box, or you can come off of mute and let us know. All right, we got San Diego, California on the line, Buenos Aires as well. Awesome. Okay, so let's jump into these round of questions here. I'm super excited to hear your experience and learn more with you and from you as we, really reshape the way that technology and just the global community is going now. So let's start with this first question. What do you do as a software engineer?
So first of all, as a software engineer, I help business succeed. That's like the number one thing that I do. That's the primary thing I feel I do. As a software engineer, you will be building things, you'll be building software, you'll be writing code to, build these software. So it could be a product, it could be a mobile app, it could be some kind of service. Beyond building software, you're also maintaining the software. As the life of the product goes, you have to make sure that the product is maintained, it's up to the latest industry standards. So that maintenance is a huge part of that work. The third thing and the final aspect that I would say, which is also what is known as migration. So let's say your company acquires another company, company one is having one set of technologies, company two is having a different set of technologies. So usually these need to be integrated. And so as a software engineer, we are responsible to make sure that we are seamlessly integrating these systems. And it's a very complex aspect of this part. But that's like the summary of what software engineers do.
And what made you decide to get into this industry?
So, I have, my background is, my undergrad is computer engineering / computer science. So it was like an obvious extension for me to enter this industry. I really enjoyed writing code when I was in my undergrad days. I just had discovered this new land where I could write things. The feeling was magical, just pure magic, where I would write something and build something. So it was an obvious extension to what I wanted to do. Obviously, eventually, when I went to grad school, I was doing, I have an MS in information technology. But at that point of time, I was still very interested in software engineering. So that's how I continued with my journey.
Awesome. And speaking of writing code, so we have another question here that was submitted offline. There are so many languages in writing code, from Python to all of the others that I'm sure you can list for us in a minute. What language did you first start learning, and how did it become your passion?
So I'm a full stack, my background is I'm a full stack engineer. So I've actually worked with a lot of different technologies. But I first started, in college, I was exposed to C and C++. But as soon as I entered the industry, I started work on the .NET stack. So a lot of my technologies that I worked with are within the Microsoft stack, which is basically the .NET stack is owned by Microsoft. Beyond that, I also do a lot of SQL, some front-end engineering, which is hardcore JavaScript libraries. And I'm crazy about SQL, to be honest. SQL and front-end, those are like my absolute passion. And it's just like, I think I started learning, the more I was learning, the more I wanted to learn. So it started evolving from that.
So we talked a little bit offline, and I told you that I'm originally from Los Angeles and now I live in Buenos Aires. And I love interviewing folks. As I've worked with PowerToFly, I've got to interview so many talented people. And one question that I love asking engineers are what languages do you speak? And I remember one interview in particular, this woman who was originally from Mexico City and had moved to New York City to work with one of our clients, and so she was bilingual as her, as we normally speak in our languages. But then when you start to talk about writing code in those kinds of languages, I just found it so fascinating that you can just extend the vision of sharing information and
Right.
calling that different languages. So if you could just kind of go down a list and say, what languages do you speak? I'd love to hear your response to that.
So I speak English and Marathi, which is also my native language. So English and Marathi are like my primary languages, and Hindi, which was I obviously grew up in India, so that was like the other language that I spoke. So these are the three languages. I did study a bit of French in high school. I wish I can say I retained some of that. Sadly, I just know a little bit of French now. I've forgotten most of it. And I've also tried to dabble in Russian, but that's still, I'm still learning, I should say.
Awesome. And so you add that onto the writing code languages. And can you give us a list of that again?
So when I'm writing code, I work on a lot of JavaScript, SQL, .NET, so that is C Sharp, ASP.NET, Web API. So these are some of the languages, hardcore. And beyond that, I do some cloud engineering. So that is, Terraform. I know a little bit of Docker. And so there are like a lot of these different other languages and technologies that I worked with. And I'm sure I've forgotten a few, but I think that should be okay.
So fascinating. And it's so cool to see that the landscape. I mean, what a beautiful mind to be able to hold all of those languages and express yourself in those ways. So awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Let's move on to our next question here. So what are the pros and cons to working as a software engineer?
So I'll answer this, but before I, speak to that, I just would like to know how many people on the audience are actual software engineers right now, or they have pivoted or still looking to pivot. If you can just do a show of hand, that would be so awesome.
Yeah, that's a great question. You can write that in the chat box. Let us know where you are in your journey. If you are thinking of pivoting, if you have pivoted, if you currently work, if you are studying, just let us know so that we can tailor some of these questions for you. Thank you for calling that out, Lena. I appreciate that.
Yeah, of course. So I guess the pros and cons of software engineering. Well, I think the biggest thing that I love about software engineering is it's extremely rewarding because you see the output of your hard work. It's a very tangible output. So I love that part. And if you like to problem solve like I do, it's a very rewarding as well. So I think that's like the biggest, it's a very, very fulfilling profession. That's like, these are like the two top pros. I would say the cons are you do not own the product or the services that you're building, which means you do not decide what gets built or what gets prioritized. These decisions are usually made by the business interfaces within the organization. So it could be product people, or sometimes it's like the goals are set higher up within the organization by the CEO or the CTO. So you do not own the product. And of course, you can advocate for what needs to be built, but the ultimate authority does not lie with you. So you should know that before you think of becoming a software engineer. I think the other disadvantage is it's pretty much a siloed role. I do not want to use the word siloed, but more often than not, you will be focused on you'll be on your computer all day and you will be writing code most of the time. Of course, you'll have meetings, but pretty much you have to be very independent and autonomous. So if you're an extrovert, you may find it slightly challenging to be in this role.
Okay, so I have two follow-up questions before I read what's in the chat box here. So one, can you also kind of dive in deeper and share some of the pros and cons about being a woman in this field in particular that has, historically been mostly male dominated? And
Mm-hmm.
then the follow-up question for being kind of, as you called it, being in front of the computer and kind of stagnant, how do you kind of balance that with other things that you do in your life for work-life balance?
Okay, so the first question is, I think as a woman, I have been pretty lucky in the sense I worked in teams where a lot of women actually were software engineers. So that was pretty awesome in my own case. I would say the disadvantages, like especially if you want to specialize in software engineering. So the typical flow is you'll be an associate software engineer, a software engineer, then a senior software engineer, and finally a principal software engineer, which is like the absolute top of the line where you can be. I have, throughout my career, I've just met one woman who was a principal software engineer. So that is a very sad statistic, really, and it's not necessarily because of the systemic problem of women not being in tech. It also happens because a lot of women are interested in different things by that time. But I think that was like a big con, is not having women leaders within like specialized principal software engineering roles who would have helped me or guided me when I was younger in my career. So that was like, that's the first part to your
Thank you for that.
question. Yeah.
Thank you for that.
And the second, which is, how do you balance, this tendency of stagnancy? Again, like this, like all things, it really depends on the leadership within your company and your team. So I feel this problem of silos can be really alleviated based on the leadership within the org or within your team. So a healthy team will always have more collaboration, a little more collaboration, a healthy dialogue. In negative teams, these will get, this problem gets more pronounced. But you as an individual can own your career, which means if you find yourself in these kind of situations, you can always take initiative and participate in teams and interactions and events beyond your own team. So you can always host a brown bag, as you are learning new things. What are some of the things that you learned? You can probably hold a brown bag within your organization. So there's some, ownership and leadership, personal leadership that's involved. And of course, if you see negative situations like too much silos, then you have to have a conversation with the leaders within your org that how can we change this, tactfully, of course, without stepping on people's toes. And work-life balance, you have to have a life beyond work. So do things that will give you fulfillment, obviously. It could be any hobbies, but I feel it's very important that you are fulfilled in all different ways. So it's, your personal leadership is very important here. You're accountable for your own journey.
Absolutely, setting those boundaries. I love that you are putting the power back to the person who is cultivating their career, not just handing it over to the company, for example.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got some folks who are writing in the chat box. I appreciate you all for sharing this. So Patricia, formerly a software engineer, would like to get back into it. Natasha, thinking of pivoting, so studying lots at the moment. And then Trixie is thinking of pivoting. So we have that to consider for the rest of this chat. And I just want to do a light pause to invite everyone or anyone to unmute themselves and ask any questions now before I read the questions that you all have submitted offline. So I'll take a little drink of water while you get the courage to unmute yourselves. Sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't.
Don't be shy.
Yeah, don't be shy. Okay, well, until then, so we've got about 15 minutes left. That's why I wanted to see if anyone wanted to kind of just voice their thoughts now, but it's totally fine. I can continue reading from the screen here. And then at any time you want, you can drop in the chat box if you aren't able to unmute yourself. Okay, so here's this question. What's your best advice to someone thinking of pursuing a career in software engineering? And then if you can kind of consider some of our current live listeners that are pivoting or studying.
Yeah, I think this is applicable. I can definitely give some advice, and this is probably applicable to anybody who's trying to pivot or who's already a software engineer. And it could be applicable to anybody who wants to do other things as well. I think first and foremost, build your own brand, which means you have to become visible Software engineers, as I mentioned, it can be a siloed role. So you have to make sure that people and leaders outside your team know about you. You have to help people. You have to become the subject matter expert, or SME as it's often called, within the domain of what you're working on. If you're owning a product, be the SME, be that person, the go-to person that people come to. People would love to ask you questions, but you should be willing to help. So, build your brand, be that SME. And, I think beyond that, there are some softer skills that are necessary, which is building people skills. I think a lot of engineers are notorious for being introverted. I'm not sure if that's really true, but I do feel engineers sometimes lack great people skills. So if you can manage your peers very well, it will help you grow professionally. I wish this was something I had known a lot. Is, I was like, yeah, maybe people are noticing me. We have no idea if people are noticing us. So we have to, be accountable to make sure you're visible within the org. You're managing expectations properly. You're building skills. You are credible. You know your stuff, basically. And finally, I would say learning to be calm under pressure. A lot of times, software engineers have to work on critical bugs, and high pressure situations can happen. And you need to be very calm in those situations. You need to be able to troubleshoot under those kind of situations. I have worked with engineers who are exceptional engineers, but they would sometimes literally crumble under pressure. They would just be completely flustered. And it's not a very conducive way to solving problems and obviously building your own brand, because people see that this person is, crumbling under pressure. So overall, taking all these steps to make sure you are successful in your career will really help you.
So this is fascinating because
Mm-hmm.
aside from, I mean, in general, when you're not an engineer, there's always this crunch, right? You got to, we're looking for data, we're looking to publish this, we're looking
Mm-hmm.
for, to release this new thing. And of course, you all are at the core creating that. So do
Mm-hmm.
you have any advice on how to just kind of keep the peace? Do you have any mantras, or do you do anything before you're about to like go and grind in on fixing a bug?
Well, I think I wouldn't necessarily say you need any special tips. I think it's more of a mindset thing. Just knowing what triggers you, what frustrates you will help you alleviate or approach those problems more carefully. What tends to happen is people are not aware about what their blind spots are, and that's when they get, these problems tend to become more pronounced. I think it's just, learning. Once you become a software engineer, you will start knowing that the nature of bugs is pretty similar. Sometimes it's very ambiguous. Sometimes the pressure is high, but it can be managed. A lot of this, I wouldn't say there is any special advice, just a mindset thing. Uh, Go there with the right attitude. That's probably the advice, the mantra I would say that is applicable.
I love that. And more on these chat and learns where people bring up mindset and even
Mm-hmm.
mindset coaching if you have trouble with kind of like, mastering your mind and not letting it defeat you, for example. So I love that you're bringing in having a balanced mindset.
Right.
And I wonder, I mean, I don't know. I love that this industry is kind of, injecting more diversity as far as gender and race and backgrounds and cultures, because
Mm-hmm.
then I think you do get to see how to consider things in a different way and not just be so like, I just wanted the typical like Wall Street, everyone, a lot of
Right.
white heterosexual men from the States just like going really quickly and just like freaking out, and just kind of bringing a little more diverse ways of having a balanced mindset. I love that you're bringing that up. I also
Yeah.
love that you bring up branding. We often talk about this on some of the chat and learns because it's something that now we have the power to do, right? Because of social media and technology,
Right.
but it is still this kind of like, I'm not a PR person, or like, I feel a little uncomfortable speaking about myself, or like this word networking really freaks me out. But I really
Right.
encourage everyone to take Lena's advice, because something as simple as keeping up a blog and posting it on your LinkedIn, keeping this little portfolio that you can acquire that, obviously that you can share outside of the company so that people can know the good work that you're doing. And you can also remind yourself of the good work that you're doing. And I think that if you do that in an authentic and intentional way, there is no reason to be kind of scared about promoting yourself and branding yourself. Do you want to say anything about that? I see you shaking your head. Yes, Lena.
I love that. I love what you said just now, being intentional. And that is really the key here is, doing some things like doing a thing, doing a few things one after once or just two times is not going to help. So if you're intentional about your journey, if you do these things consistently, people are going to notice. So what Mariella just said is like awesome advice. Start that blog, do things you can do to become more visible within your organization and even beyond the organization that you're working in or you would be working in.
Absolutely. And then the last thing before we go into another question here, I love that you highlight basically empathy and emotional intelligence when you have to be making these kind of like on the grind decisions, or you have to kind of be static for a long time. If you probably heard me mention on some of the previous chats, last year I spoke in San Francisco to in a room full of programmers, developers, engineers, business folks about the importance of emotional intelligence and inclusive community in the workplace. And it's just something that I love speaking about, is bringing in emotional intelligence and empathy, because otherwise you're in front of a piece of technology all day and you're not connected to your own emotions and to other people, and that just continues to draw like deeper lines and build taller walls. And so I love that you as an engineer who you have the responsibility of creating products as you are given those tasks. But you are approaching it not just kind of like as a number on the wheel, you are approaching it with emotional intelligence and empathy in mind. So I applaud you on that, and we need more of that. And I'm not sure if you want to say anything after that before I move to the next question.
No, I think you summed it up very well. And this was awesome. I mean, what you just mentioned, bring that empathy and emotional intelligence. That will go a long way in not just your career, but how you start influencing other people. So absolutely.
Yay. Great. Okay, so let's move on to this next question here. We've got about a little 10 minutes left. So I really want to get at least two more questions going and then open up to the floor for our live callers to chime in as well. So we have a question here. I enjoy writing code, but I'm unsure of whether software engineering is for me. What other jobs are there that are similar? And how do I pick what industry to go into? Should I base it on pay, flexibility, work hours, work culture?
So before I answer that, if the person who asked it, would it be possible to give a little more background on what your concerns are? So you mentioned you like to code, but you're not sure of whether software engineering is for you. So can you elaborate a little bit on that if we have just a couple of minutes on that?
Yes, I'd love to hear from you. If you wrote that question, and even if you didn't write that question, if you're kind of in a similar situation, or maybe you also have some feedback, we'd love to hear from you, because I'm not sure if this person is on the line, but
Okay.
we're opening it up for you all that are on the line.
Okay. I mean, I can obviously give, oops, my Zoom just disappeared for a moment. Okay, I can definitely give some advice on that. There are many fields that kind of overlap with software engineering. I wouldn't say everything is very similar. So that's why I wanted to ask, like, what exactly are your specific concerns around software engineering? What I will say is there are other jobs, like if you like to work in the trenches and in details, then, becoming a data scientist can be helpful. You can potentially become a functional analyst as well. There's some aspects of project management that software engineers do. So that's another potential, role that you could explore. I will highly discourage you to select any profession based on just money or any real, money or just the location. I think the most important thing, at least for me, which is the job satisfaction. So obviously, what I would do if I were you is make a list of the most important things for you. So what are the non-negotiable items in that list? What is that? What is something that you must absolutely have in your career? Make a note of that. What are the must-haves? Just make a note of those. What are the things that you can negotiate on? What are the things you can compromise on at this time? So based on this, you can potentially explore other professions that will help you, or even industries that will help you, choose the right profession.
Again, I love that you're putting the power back to the person instead of, kind of going out and seeking that extra kind of sensory feedback. Patricia here has written that it wasn't her question, but the criteria for choosing a job, location, flexibility, etc., will be very personal. So agreeing with you, Lena. If a spouse has a good job, that may limit location. If you have kids, flexibility may be the most important, and so on.
Yeah, and again, that's the thing is, like, for example, this example that Patricia has given, which is a great example, if your spouse has a great job, that may limit location. So at this time, you cannot change your job based on location. So that you just, ignore that aspect, but focus on job satisfaction the most. I think there are a couple of books that I can recommend. I think the book is called something about a parachute, Who Moved Your Parachute. I'll have to get back on that one. But this book, I mean, there are a lot of books that actually give career advice, but I think the summary of all these books and concepts is that make a list of the most important items for you that you can negotiate on and not negotiate on. And as I mentioned, professions like data science, project management, function analysis can help you with some of these decisions. That is right. What color is your parachute? Absolutely. Thanks, Patricia. Yeah, this book is a great book, and I highly recommend that.
Yes. Patricia, did you want to say something? I see you're off of mute. Feel free.
Yeah, no, I was going to jump in on the what color is your parachute? But Lena was still talking, so I typed it in instead.
Yeah, no, awesome. Thanks for calling that out.
And did you read the book, Patricia? Did you have some feedback on that?
I've been through earlier editions earlier in my career. I haven't picked up a copy lately. They revise it periodically. Awesome. Used to be every year. I haven't been following, so I don't know if that's still true.
Okay, well, thank you for clarifying that. And so let's move on to this next question here, and then we'll open the floor for folks to jump off of mute. So we have the last question here in the chat box. I just started taking a coding class because I want to pivot into a tech career. Any tips on the best approach to take once I complete my certification and start looking for any entry-level tech positions as a mature job seeker?
This is actually a great question. What I will focus on, if I were you, while you're, doing your coding classes, is also start building side projects if it's possible for you. So do an activity that you can time bound and try to do that as part of your portfolio. This will really help you in your job search. At the same time, these days, it's really possible to, be involved in a lot of online communities. Like if you can post any answers on communities like Stack Overflow, you can actually start building your own brand beyond over there as well. So I think, just get active on LinkedIn and social media, build that portfolio, which will really help you when navigating your job search.
Absolutely. Great advice. Okay, so we have just about 2 minutes left. So I'd love to hear from our live callers. I always say I'm going to sound like a broken record by inviting everyone to speak, but I just want to make sure that everyone feels free to speak. So we'll hold for a light pause to see if anyone wants to jump off of mute.
Okay, I'll be brave. I was a C programmer for I tried typing this in, but I guess it didn't make it to your list, Mary Ellen. Excuse me. I was a C programmer for 20 years. And the tech bubble burst. What was available was a system administrator's job. I took it, and that's what I've been doing ever since. So I've been away from software development for a decade and a half plus. And I would like to get back into it now. Seems like there are more remote development jobs than there are remote system administration jobs, and remote seems like a very good idea in this environment. There doesn't seem to be a whole lot of demand for C out there right now. What would be good stepping stone languages or techniques, or what should I study to get back into software development?
This is another great question. So as we all know, technology is evolving quite a bit these days. So it's really hard to keep up to date with all the technologies. I know that a lot of people are getting into cloud engineering. It's really the absolute in thing right now. So it's an extension of software engineering, frankly speaking, but that's if you're interested in cloud stuff, AWS, that would be something to explore. Beyond that, I would say, Python is a language that is, I have not worked on it professionally, but I've done some side projects, and it seems to be a very easy language to learn. So that is something you can consider doing. But I would say, cloud engineering is something I would, especially if you want to stay within software engineering and the related, profession, I would recommend cloud engineering as something to really consider. It's very interesting if you're interested in networking, and it's the absolute in thing, and it'll be here to stay for a while. Patricia, does that help?
Thank you.
Or yeah.
Awesome.
Yes,
Thank you
thanks.
so much. Thank you for asking your question, Patricia. And Lena, is it okay for folks to connect with you on LinkedIn?
Oh,
How can they
absolutely. Absolutely.
Great. So go ahead and connect with Lena on LinkedIn. You can follow up with some more questions there. I hope to have her back on another Chat and Learn. Actually, you will be speaking next month, and your topic is going to be around financial something, right? Or have you figured out a title yet?
Yeah, it's going to be personal finance 101, but we're still working out the details. But yeah, I'm excited about that as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for joining us. These past 30 minutes flew by. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn as well. And I hope that everyone enjoys their weekend. So Lena, thank you so much. And I hope to see you again soon. Actually, I want to be hosting your chat next month, so I will be.
Oh, awesome. Great. Thanks, everyone. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. So long.